So my gaming room setup is finally complete, and it's been quite the journey. And if you don't remember, this is what it looked like when I first started. But over time, I've documented almost every step of the way, and I want to put all those projects into one long video so you can see the complete transformation take place. I'll start with the LED desk that I made, which was a pretty tedious process, but in the end it turned out great. I'll then do the actual gaming setup, which to date has over 4.5 million views. I'll then show you how I made these DIY acrylic LED speaker stands, and then the installation of the Nanoleaf Blocks. Next, I'll transition to building my LED media console that was definitely a labor of love, and then go over what might be my favorite video I've ever done, which is how I built this custom Ambilight setup using WLED to play nice with my projector. I'll also include the video on making these corner ceiling to floor lights that I used in the setup that turned out great and are also renter friendly. I'll go over the struggles I went through in creating my console gaming setup on the back wall that includes adding an outlet and running all the wires behind the sheetrock, to the installation of an HDMI 2.1 Ambilight kit to the back of my Sony Bravia 8 TV for some added immersion. I'll create chapters for every project so you can jump around to the ones that interest you, and I'll leave links to all the products I ended up using in case anything catches your eye. Thank you all so much for coming along with me on this journey, and I hope you enjoy the video. For the past few years, one of my favorite things to do on YouTube is watch gaming setup and room tour videos, but recently there were two specific walkthroughs that just blew me away. One by Tech Tesseract and the other by Maddie K, and if you haven't watched them yet, make sure to check them out because they're both absolutely incredible in their own way. So using their setups as inspiration, I'm going to begin my own journey on creating the ultimate gaming space. Now there's many places where I could begin, but for my first video and what I'm sure will be many more to come on this process, I'm going to take a heavy-duty L-shaped sit-stand desk and try to incorporate some unique LED lighting into the structure, all while making sure cables and cords are as hidden as possible. To kick things off, let's first get the desk assembled. I didn't have any help, and from start to finish it took about 45 minutes. Instructions were clear and easy to follow. Now in my opinion, any great setup has to figure out cable management. I'll leave links to everything I'm using, but since I'm going for a white theme, I wanted everything to blend in as much as possible, so I found a lot of clips, covers, mesh wraps, tape, and other things that will help achieve a clean look. Since the control center's in the front and there's a black cord that gets connected to the power unit in the middle, I'm going to first use a mesh covering over the cable and then use some clear clips to secure it to the frame. Now because I'm going to be making some sharp angles, I'm going to reinforce a couple of the clips to the metal with some super glue to make sure they hold strong. So for cable management, I'm really trying to do two things. First, as much as possible, I want to keep everything in the back area of the desk, and two, I don't want loose wires hanging down, so keeping everything flat against the surface is crucial. Now fortunately, as we're getting the power cords for the lift motors plugged in, you'll notice that the metal frame does create a nice spot for us to tuck those cables in to conceal. There will be a little bit of them exposed as they make their way to the box, but I'll probably just use some more white mesh later on to wrap them if it's very noticeable when done. Overall, things are looking pretty good so far, other than those couple areas where you can see a little bit of the black wire sticking out over the metal frame, but those are the spots that I'll probably just end up wrapping in the mesh sleeves. So I still have the main power cable to figure out, but I'll deal with that later. For now, I'm just going to do a quick test to make sure the legs go up and down before flipping things over. So I know it says it can support a little over 300 pounds, and being that I only weigh 200, I thought I would hop on and go for a ride to test it out myself. So now that the desk is assembled for the most part, it's time to move on to the main event, which is figuring out the best way to incorporate some unique RGB lighting. I'm going to start by ordering some aluminum profiles, and if you've seen any of my other videos, you already know that this is by far the best channel that you can buy on Amazon. Now a few things that make this product from Musada so special is that they're able to perfectly diffuse strips that have 60 LEDs per meter to give off a beautiful neon glow. And the second reason is you can buy them in 2-meter long sections like you're seeing here, and having this extra length just means you'll have less seams to deal with when trying to butt them up to each other for longer runs, which will make the final results look more polished and professional. The first thing you're going to want to do is snap the diffuser cover onto the aluminum frame. Just start at one end and work your way down to the other side. Taking a closer look at these, you'll notice that the top part is slightly curved, which will allow for the light to be evenly dispersed, but the real key to this design is that it's a deeper channel than most out there, and you need that extra distance to ensure an even glow when lit. Now what's great about pairing these two products together is that the edge of the desk is pretty much the exact same size as the diffuser channel, so my hope is that when adding these around the perimeter, it'll look as if it's meant to be there and wasn't something that was just added. And from previously working with these aluminum profiles, I know that they can easily be cut with any hacksaw you might have laying around, or in my case, I've just used my miter saw with the normal blade it came with and have always had great results. And as you can see here, cutting these at a 45-degree angle and putting them together make for a near perfect joint for the inside corners, and likewise when doing the same for the outside edges. So taking all the measurements and cutting all the channels down to length was probably the most tedious part of the entire project, because they have to be the exact size to make sure they fit perfectly. A little too short and you're going to have a gap in the corner, and a little too long and it won't be able to make that perfect 90-degree turn. So just make sure to measure it twice and take your time on this part. Now that I have all my pieces cut, it's time to attach them to the desk, and this was one of the areas I had the hardest time figuring out exactly what to do. I wanted them to be as flush with the desk as possible, and while using the included clips would work pretty well, it would not be as clean of a look as I was wanting. I also don't want to damage the desk in any way, and if I were to remove these down the road, I didn't want the ugly screw holes left behind. I also tried duct tape, and that was just a little too thick, and you could see the tiny gap between the profile and the desk that I didn't like. I finally ended up stumbling on the perfect solution. It's this extremely thin double-sided sticky tape that's about 15 millimeters wide and fits perfectly around the edge. It's the best of both worlds because it's very strong and will keep the channels in place, but with some force you can remove things with no damage to the desk or the aluminum. And being that it's so thin, there is no visible space between the two surfaces. I'm now just going to work my way around and put everything in place. Next, with everything attached and secured, I'm going to remove all the diffuser covers since obviously we still need to install the LED strips. And this is where you are going to have plenty of options. I ended up going with some 5V BTF lighting SK6812 lights. I've been using these a lot lately because of the separate dedicated LED they have just for whites to go along with all the possible color combinations you could ever want. But being that these diffuser channels do look great, using any strip that has 60 LEDs per meter or more means that you could certainly go the plug and play route and use the Govee M1 strip, which would look awesome as well. Next, I measured the total length around the perimeter and it was about 18 feet. And to prep the LED strip, I soldered my own 18-gauge silicone wires to the beginning and added a little over 2 feet of lights to the end. Now if you are curious on that process, I did make a how-to solder video that goes over exactly what I just did in great detail with close-up footage that I highly recommend taking a look at if you might be intimidated of soldering like I was when I first started. I'm going to begin installing the strip right back here and then making my way around in a clockwise direction. And to make it easier to see, I'll move the desk so you can get a better view. So this is pretty simple, as all you have to do is remove the sticky tape from the back and make your way along the path. Now before getting to the end, I'm going to take a small drill bit and make 3 tiny holes on the side of the profile, which I'm then going to feed my 3 wires through. I'll use a little bit of electrical tape to keep these tight against the bottom, and then I'll finish putting down the remainder of the strip and then cutting off the extra LEDs that would be overlapping. And finally, you can go around and reattach the diffusers to the channels. And just when I thought I was about done, I had another idea, so back to work I went. I cut an additional 6 pieces of aluminum profiles, each at around 24 inches in length. I then used the same type of LED strips as before and cut 6 strips to fit them. Next, I just did about 20 minutes worth of soldering to again attach my own 18-gauge silicone wires to the beginning of each strip. And as a reminder, everything I'm going over right now, I show you how to do in the previously mentioned soldering video I put together, so I won't spend much time here. I should now have a total of 6 strips that I can put in the aluminum channels. And one thing I forgot to mention is that since I'm using all white wires in order to blend in better with the desk, it's going to make your life a lot easier when putting this all together if you somehow mark your voltage and ground cables. And finally, I'll be adding end caps to the bottom of each of these. So my idea was to have these extra lights hooked up to the 3 vertical legs of the desk. Now I can easily go back and add more later if I want, but for now I'm going to put 2 profiles on each post and use the same sticky tape as before to secure them. Now it's officially time to get everything wired up, and at the beginning of the video I said that cable management was going to be something I really focused on, so I'll take you through step by step of what I ended up doing. So this cord is connected to the supply for the lift motors. I'm going to replace it with one that's white as well as much shorter. Next, I'm going to use some double-sided Velcro tape, which I'll be using to secure a power strip to the desk. Ideally, you're going to want to use one that allows you to plug things in on the side versus the top so that everything is parallel to the surface. And here I'll be using some white duct tape to make sure the cord lays as flat as possible. Now to power all the LEDs, I'm going to be using a BTF Lighting 5V 60 amp supply, and I'll also be using the double-sided Velcro tape to secure it to the table. To provide power to this supply, I got another short AC cord that I'll be cutting off the connector, stripping back the live, neutral, and ground wires, using a ferrule crimping tool to put some connectors on, and then inserting them into the appropriate screw terminals. I'll go ahead and plug this in and then secure the cords to the table. Next, on all the legs, I'm going to use a zip tie to keep the wires that are connected to the LED strip pressed firmly up against the bottom of the profile. I'll quickly do this for all three areas. So my plan is to control the lights using WLED installed on ESP32 boards. I'm going to have a total of 4 of these modules installed. Each leg will have its own, and then the final board will be for the lights around the table. And if you're curious on what exactly WLED is or how to install it, I made video walkthroughs you can check out if interested. Another thing I'll be using a lot of are these WEGO connectors. They allow you to make quick connections between wires in addition to making it easy to add more lights down the road if you want. And finally, I ordered 4 of these white travel soap containers, and they're going to be perfect for hiding the wires as well as giving the ESP module some protection. To get started, I'm going to bring my 6 total wires that are connected to the LED strip on the first leg of the table towards the back area and tape things down as neat as possible. Next, take a drill bit and make a hole in one of the bottom corners of the soap dish. Now go ahead and feed all 6 of the wires through the opening. So just to make sure we're on the same page, of the 6 total wires I'm working with right now, 3 are connected to this LED strip in the diffuser, and the 3 others are connected to the LED strip that's out of sight right around the corner. Now this is where having the wires marked with color is going to come in handy. You should have 2 wires that are connected to the voltage pad on the 2 LED strips. Put those in a 5-piece WEGO connector. Next, find the 2 ground cables and put them in a separate 5-piece slot. And finally, connect the 2 data lines to their own 3-piece clip. Take the ESP device and get it hooked up to our setup. The red VIN line goes with the 5-piece voltage connector, the white GND wire goes with our 5-piece ground clip, and then our green data line gets combined with the 3-slot connector. So we're not quite done with this one yet, but right now we have to set up our power. For this step, I'm taking 2 new 18-gauge white wires and cutting them to about 10 inches. I'll again strip these and put on some ferrule plugs before putting one into the power supply's positive terminal and the other into the negative slot. I'm going to run these 2 wires as close as I can to the white metal railing and then put a 3-slot WEGO at the end of each. From here, I'm going to make another hole in the box and then run 1 more wire from this 3-piece WEGO clip, which is my negative, into the 5-piece WEGO clip in the container that's my ground. I'll then do the same for my positive, which will go into the 5-piece WEGO clip that has all my voltage lines in the soap dish. I'll put the lid back on and then use a little tape underneath to secure to the table. This next one is going to be a little easier. I'll run 2 more wires from the last available slots on the 3-piece WEGO clips connected to the power over towards the wires for our LED strips going around the table. And from here, it's pretty much doing the exact same thing that we just did, which is getting everything connected inside the soap box with another ESP controller. Moving on to our second leg, I'm going to connect a longer set of wires back to our main power supply. These wires will run along the edge with my other ones over to the leg we're working on, and again set things up pretty much the same as we just did, except these wires will go directly into the voltage and ground 5-piece WEGO clips inside the third box. And for the final step, I'll be running another long set of wires connected to the last opening of the 5-piece WEGO voltage and ground connectors in the container we just put together over to our last leg. Then we can go ahead and use our last soap dish and ESP32 to complete our wiring. So looking at this, I do realize I have 0 cords from a PC and many other things that will eventually be added, but for having this many LEDs and wires running all over the place, I'm very happy with how clean things currently are from a cable management standpoint. So the last few years I've spent way too much time watching gaming setup and room tour videos on YouTube, as well as endlessly scrolling through Reddit looking at some of the most incredible battle stations people have put together, and really just dreaming of the day, which has finally arrived, that I might be in a position to create something special myself. Now to kick things off, I of course needed to find some area in my house where I could start setting things up, and using an open space like this did make me a little bit nervous because traditionally you're going to want to use a corner area for better aesthetics, but the way my downstairs is laid out with windows, doors, and closets, this was really my only option. Now the first thing I did was pick up a few items from IKEA. I ended up going with one of their wall shelf units, 2 of their floating shelves, and 1 Kallax 4-cubby display. This was my first experience with IKEA products, and I can see why people like them. They're super easy to put together, and the quality exceeded my expectations when compared to their low cost. And as always, I'll try to leave links in the description for everything I end up using in this video, but let me know if I do end up missing anything so I can go back and update. Once they were all assembled, it was time to hang things. I'll be putting the shelf unit on the left-hand side about 8 inches off the ground. Next, I'll be installing the floating shelves to the right at staggered heights. Now as far as the desk, I went with the heavy-duty L-shaped sit-stand option from Fazebo. And in a video I released just a couple months ago, I went over how to easily add some amazing custom LED lights to the perimeter and frame. I also made sure that after everything was set up, cable management would be on point and there'd be no visible wires hanging down. I was absolutely blown away by the response to this mod, and currently the video has over 360,000 views, so make sure to check it out if you're interested in the complete step-by-step process. And for the cubbies, since I'm not entirely sure where I want them yet, I'll just keep it off to the side until I find a good spot. So right now, I have what I would consider to be the skeleton of what will be our end result. You can begin to see things taking form, but we're still very far away from being complete. Now the one thing I did go back and change from the original desk video is that I used a larger power strip. I wanted to get one that provided better protection in case of surges, since I will end up having some expensive equipment plugged in. So I think the most important part of any setup is going to be the PC itself, and I've seen some of the biggest gaming YouTubers out there such as TechSource and Maddie K talk about light gaming PCs, so they're the first place I reached out to, and they agreed to send me one of their heavy hitters for this video. Now a few things I like about light gaming is that they list all the prices for each component of the build. This means if you're the type that wants to then go out and see how much you could build it for, you can figure out exactly how much money you'd be saving by doing it yourself to determine if spending the extra money is worth the convenience of clicking order and simply plugging things in when it arrives. And for added peace of mind, all their PCs can be returned for free within 30 days if you're not completely satisfied for a full refund, as well as taking care of you if there happens to be any other issues. I'll leave a link in the description, so make sure to check them out if you're in the market for a gaming PC, as prices start out at $799 for a full build. Now as I'm getting things unpacked, you're going to have to go through 2 layers of boxes, all surrounded by bubble wrap, before you get to the main event. Then there's still the internal packaging that has to be removed before you can behold the beauty. And let me tell you, Light Gaming absolutely crushed it with this build. I was very specific with them on what I was looking for in terms of performance and looks, and they were able to deliver on both fronts. And this will absolutely fit perfectly with my all-white theme, but most importantly, it'll be able to run any game I want at max settings without even breaking a sweat. The next big ticket item on the list is going to be a monitor, and I ended up going with the Alienware 3423DW, which in my opinion is still the best monitor on the market for gaming, and since my desk isn't massive, this 34-inch curved OLED panel should be the perfect size for my space. Getting this set up was an absolute breeze, and everything could be done by hand with no tools. The stand that it comes with snaps into place, and within 5 minutes it was already assembled. Moving on to the keyboard, and I went with the Razer Deathstalker V2 Pro. This has to be one of the best looking keyboards out there and will go perfectly with my all white theme. And I also stuck with Razer for the mouse, settling on the V3 Pro. I do have pretty big hands, and after trying a few different styles out, this one by far felt the most comfortable. And to set these peripherals on, I went with this 32 by 12 inch minimalistic pad with the non-slip base. Nothing too fancy about this, but I just really liked the way it looked. I also picked up the Elgato Stream Deck MK.2, and you really can't go wrong with one of these since you can customize them to pretty much work with anything you need. And for controllers, I went back and forth between the Xbox Elite and PS5 DualSense Edge, but ultimately I went with the Elite since it was a little bit cheaper, and overall I just love the way it looks. Now once I had things set up on the table, at least for me, the legs on the monitor are taking up way too much real estate, so I ordered an arm to free up some space for a much cleaner look. I ended up going with the mount from Vivo that supports ultra-wide monitors up to 49 inches and 33 pounds. And since I do have the LED lights going around the outside of the desk, I made sure this had the option to install things using a grommet system instead of the typical clamp style you would normally see. I'll need to first drill a small hole through my desk and then secure the base to the surface by using a large screw and a metal faceplate underneath. Then there's going to be 2 separate arm extension pieces that will slide into the post on the base unit. Next, I'll have to take my monitor and remove the stand from the back that I installed earlier and replace it with the included VESA attachment. I'll then take the VESA adapter that came with the mounting system and secure them together using the screws that also came with the monitor. Now I think the easiest way is to remove the now attached adapter and transfer it to the arm mount that we just set up so that I can then bring the monitor over to snap it in place. I can then adjust the tension of the spring to make sure it supports the weight of the monitor while still being able to move it around freely. So for many people, I'm sure this wouldn't be a big deal, but I'm not digging how noticeable these black wires are coming from the monitor, as well as the cables plugged into the back of the PC. To help things blend in, I'll be using some white mesh wrap. This is about as simple of a solution as you can get, and for sure cleans things up to the point where your eyes are not automatically drawn to the cords. So if it's not clear from a lot of the videos on my channel, I really do enjoy creating unique environments using LED lights. My idea for this setup is to put some accent lighting around the floating shelves plus the wall unit on the left. I'll be using the same aluminum profiles and same SK6812 pixels that I installed on the desk, so everything should be able to sync and play nice together. Now you could certainly use a hand saw, but I'll just be using the regular blade on my miter saw to make all the angled cuts as well as cutting them down to size to fit. And as far as getting these attached to the wall, you certainly could use the mounting brackets that these channels come with, but I pretty much only use these 3M sticky pads now since they can easily be removed with no repair work needing to be done after. So this whole process of putting up the channels and installing the lights was by far the most time-consuming part of the project. Right now I'm putting the LEDs in the profile starting at the top right and making my way around going clockwise while making the controversial 90-degree bend. Now I did solder my own 18-gauge silicone wires to the beginning of the strip, and if you're curious to learn a little bit more about that process, I made a how-to solder video that goes over everything you need to know with extreme close-up footage and detailed commentary that I highly recommend you checking out if interested. So I picked up some very small raceway tracks to try hiding the cords that are hanging down from the LED strips. I used the same 3M removable wall tape to secure everything down. Now one thing that I'm trying to accomplish is for this to end up looking great not only at night but also during the day. Cable concealers traditionally are fine for me, but after seeing how they look in daylight right here, in which they're hiding the long wires that'll provide power, ground, and data to the lights, I personally think this looks horrible. So as much as I hate the extra work, I'm going to have to feed the wires behind the wall and down to the floor. But before tackling that, I'll finish up the shelf unit on the left. Now to run the wires behind the wall, I picked up a product from Magnapol, which basically allows you to use a very strong magnet to guide a leader with your cables attached from one spot to the next. I'm for sure going to be holding on to this item for future projects, but thankfully I didn't even need to use it. The other side of this wall actually butts up to my utility closet, and after going around to check, there was no insulation or fire blocks on the other side, and all I had to do was drop the wires in the small hole, go back around, pull them down, and then push them through the bottom. And to conceal the top openings, I'm just going to use a couple wall plugs that you can get in different sizes. So after doing both sections, it really is a night and day difference, and I'm super glad I took the extra time to do it. Moving on to another important piece, which is the chair, and I went with this brand new ergonomic offering from Sihu that comes in a white or black option. And I actually first heard about this product when reading a Forbes article where they called it an affordable alternative to a $700 Herman Miller chair. Getting this put together was about as easy as it could possibly get. Instructions were very clear and everything you need for assembly is included. Now I've had this for a couple weeks and I can confidently say this is the most comfortable chair I've ever used. The lumbar support is somehow able to adjust on its own depending on how you're sitting, so it's always in contact with your back. So definitely check these guys out if you're in the market for something new. Next, I needed to find something to give the back wall some added texture, and I really do love the way these type of 3D panels look, and I'm sure it would have turned out great, but I wanted to go with something not quite as common since you do see these in so many setups today. I ended up going with this really cool Dragon Scale 3D type product that I saw Edgar from TechSource use in a recent video, which I thought looked amazing. You basically have these black pieces that you can arrange in any combination of ways that you'd like to make a design, and then these scale looking things just snap in place. You can use some small screws to secure these to the wall, but since they are so light, I'll again just be using some sticky pads. And once you're happy with the design, you can go ahead and start snapping the 3D scales in place. So I do get a lot of questions about how I conceal wires, a controller, and power supply, so I thought I'd include one way you can go about doing this if you don't have something in your room to hide everything behind. So these wires that you're looking at are the ones I put through the wall that run up to the floating shelves. I'm going to use some basic cable concealer to run the wires through, and next I found this great bathroom decor box that has plenty of ventilation, which will work great for housing the ESP32 controller with WLED installed, as well as our power supply. And this does a perfect job of making what would normally be an eyesore something that blends in much better. It's not a perfect solution, but unless you want to go through the work of putting everything behind sheetrock and then patching everything back up, this is about as good as it's going to get. Now in a previous video I did go over this exact same process, so feel free to check that out if you're interested, since I do go over things in a little bit more detail. For the other side, I'm going to simplify things and use an awesome plug-and-play controller from Domestic Automation that comes with WLED pre-installed. This white one I have here is specifically built for the SK6812 LEDs that I'm using in this build. Now they also include this great little mounting track that'll stick to the bottom of the shelf. Then all I have to do is plug in my power and then use some cable concealer as well as some white mesh wrap to help things blend in as best as possible. And if you are curious to learn a little bit more about these plug-and-play controllers from Domestic Automation and other button and motion sensor attachments that they offer, I highly recommend checking out a couple videos I did recently going over this product in much more detail. So one of the last things to do, which will never truly be done, is to go ahead and add some decor to match your current style and interests. This is something that could go in so many different directions depending on what you like, but for me personally, I'm going to go for a clean, futuristic, minimal garden vibe, if that's even a thing. I also still need to order a nice pair of white speakers and would love to hear some suggestions if anyone has recommendations. Now as I continue to set things up, I have to say that this was by far the most fun I've had on any project I've done up until now, and I really hope if there's anyone out there who, like me, has always been dreaming of doing something like this, that you'll be inspired like I was by so many others to try turning your vision into reality. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I hope you enjoy the final pictures and videos. So in my recent gaming room setup video that I released a little over a month ago, I mentioned that I still needed to get a nice set of white desktop speakers and asked if anyone had recommendations. I was blown away at how many responses I got, and after looking online and doing a little research on every single one that was suggested, I ended up going with the pair that I thought, in my opinion, not only looked the best, but also had glowing reviews. In this video, I'll show you which ones I ended up going with, as well as walking you through how I built some custom acrylic edge-lit speaker stands that might actually be the most tedious project I've ever done. Now to get things started, the first thing I did was order a couple 12 by 12 inch acrylic squares with a thickness of a ½ inch or approximately 13 millimeters. And speakers can end up being pretty heavy, so getting it in this size thickness should for sure provide a strong enough base for me to use. Next, I had to decide what type of LED lights to go with, and in the end I landed on these SK6812 strips from BTF Lighting that have 144 LEDs per meter. These are individually addressable, plus provide a separate LED just for whites, which is a nice option to have. And furthermore, what's great about these is that they're exactly half an inch wide, so it's going to line up perfectly with the edge of our acrylic when it comes time to get everything put together. So in order for edge lighting to work, the surface of what you're trying to illuminate has to be frosted. There are different ways you can go about to accomplish this, but perhaps the easiest is to just use a sander. I'm using 220 grit paper, which seemed to work just fine. Now ideally, you could just buy it frosted or what some call milky or cloudy, but I wasn't able to find it like this in the thickness I was looking for. I went ahead and sanded both sides of the acrylic as well as 3 of the 4 edges. Now, since the 12 by 12 inch size is a little too big for the speakers I ended up going with, I borrowed my brother-in-law's table saw to cut these down to the size I want. I am just using the standard blade that this came with and going nice and slow, but the cuts did end up coming out perfect. Next up, I need to create something to put the LED strips in. This is where having a 3D printer would be very helpful, but since I don't have one, I'll start things off by cutting 4 small 1/4 inch slices from a 1 inch square dowel. Here I'll be going back to the table saw and using that same piece of wood, I'll be cutting a groove out down the middle that's a 1/2 inch thick. Now once the groove's complete, I'm going to cut this into 2 shorter sections that will be the same length as our acrylic, and then eventually I'll use the end caps that we sliced off earlier to enclose things. I also went out and got this 1/2 inch wide and very thin piece of aluminum. I'm going to put this on the bottom of the channel to help with heat disbursement from the LEDs, plus the adhesive on the back of the lights will stick much better to this compared to just the wood. At this point, I'm going to take the router table out and make a very small incision on one side of our wooden pieces. This will create a large enough gap when the end caps are attached that I should be able to run the wires from the LED strip through. So moving on, I spent some time online and nothing really jumped out in terms of an actual stand, and due to the limited space I have on the desk, I figured I'd have to come up with something myself. I went to my local hardware store and picked up a lot of different angles and attachments from their metal piping section to see if this might be an option. After playing around with things for a little bit, I came up with a design I thought might work. You can get these in different sizes, but I went with a 3/4 inch option, which I'm hoping will still give me enough room to feed cables through so that in the end, no wires will be visible. Next, I'm going to remove the key light and mic arm from the setup and take the base piece of the stand that we just put together and trace a spot on the table where I want things anchored. I'll first drill some small pilot holes before switching to a larger 1/4 inch bit. Now as far as being able to feed the wires through the table, I'll use this 3/4 inch hole saw attachment to make the larger cutout in the middle. And then after unplugging and moving the PC back, I'll be doing the exact same thing on the right side. So we also have to get our acrylic piece connected to the top part of the stand. I'll first trace out the holes and then I'll use a 1/2 inch Forstner bit to go a little less than halfway through the plastic, which will allow our screw to sit below surface. And then use the same 1/4 inch bit from the previous step to go the rest of the way through. Here I'll switch back to the Forstner bit, but this time a 3/4 inch one for the center cutout. Now to keep in line with my mostly white themed setup, I'll be spray painting both the wooden channels and the stands using this Paint Plus Primer Ultra Matte from Rust-Oleum. After letting things dry for a couple hours, it's definitely looking pretty good. I'll probably go back and do a few touch-ups here and there by hand, but overall I like how everything's coming together. So let's switch gears and go over how we're going to get the LEDs set up. I could just cut off the first LED, but for the sake of not wasting anything, I'm going to take this strip and cut back the heat shrink at the beginning to expose the wires. I'll then use my hot soldering iron to remove all the pre-soldered connections since I want to attach my own 18-gauge silicone wires instead. Now I won't spend too much time on this process since everything I'm doing here I do go over in extreme detail with close-up footage in a how-to solder video I made recently that I highly recommend checking out if interested. Once this is complete, I'm going to attach the aluminum piece to the wood with some super glue. Then I'll figure out exactly how much of the strip I need, make the cut, and then attach it to the bottom of the channel using the 3M sticky tape backing. And this is where the little notch that we cut out earlier using the router table comes into play. The wires will hopefully fit in the gap, allowing us to put the end caps on for a more clean and seamless look, which I'll again be using some more super glue to attach. Now that we have our LEDs put together, we can move our attention back to the acrylic pieces. Here I'll take some 1/4-inch screws that I believe are 1 inch long and slide them into the countersink holes that we made previously, and then secure on the other side to the top of the stand that we just spray painted. So here I've just slid on the LED piece to see how things are coming together, and so far so good. Next, I needed to come up with something to slightly raise the speakers off the acrylic because I need a little space to run the wires underneath and through the piping, as well as providing some buffer to reduce any vibrations. I ended up finding this 10mm thick foam roll that should work perfect. I'll be cutting it down to a much smaller size than the base of the speakers in hopes of creating somewhat of a floating effect, similar to the design of what you'd see on a floating bed. And don't worry about making this look too perfect because it's not something that's going to be very visible once everything's set up. Moving on, it's now time to attach the base to the desk. For this, I'll just be using some 1/4-inch thick screws that are 1.5 inches long that will go through the table and secured with the washer followed by a nut underneath. Then I'll be adding the middle section to the base unit, which you can just twist until you have it at the desired angle. And finally, I'll be screwing on our acrylic section that's attached to the top bracket. Now once the left side is done, I'll rinse and repeat everything I just did, but this time for the right side. At this point, it's about time for me to start feeding the wires through. I'll start by sliding the 3 18-gauge silicone wires through the pipes that are attached to the LED strips in our wooden pieces. Then I'll move on to feeding the larger banana plug speaker wires through the same spot. And just like before, I'll have to do the exact same thing for the right side. Now I knew going with the 3/4 inch diameter piping wouldn't allow me to simply feed the entire power strip through, so in order for me to make this work, I cut the cable closer to the power outlet side. I'll eventually reconnect everything back together using some Wago connectors, which I'll get into later, but this should now allow me to run the power through the desk, ensuring there'll be no visible cables. And if you hadn't already figured it out by the thumbnail, I ended up going with the Cano Tuck speakers. When doing my research on all the options, I just kept going back to this one, and I know it's personal preference, but to me, they absolutely nailed the design element and created something that really stands out from the crowd in terms of the way they look. And after reading about all the tech that these featured, seeing all the positive reviews online, and not to mention everyone that suggested in my gaming room setup video that I should get these, I was very confident in my decision. Now in terms of a high level overview, these are rocking an impressive AMT tweeter, 5¼ inch aluminum woofer, and all this is wrapped in a modern, clean design with virtually no visible seams on the casing except for the back panel, and you can get these in either white or black. On the front, you also have your headphone jack as well as the volume control that also doubles as a power on and off, as well as cycling through the different input options. On the back is where you'll find the many different types of connections you can choose from. You have your USB input that will automatically sync to whatever computer you're using. There's a dedicated RCA line in, a dedicated RCA phono, an optical for easy hookup for, let's say, a TV if that's something that you wanted to do. And another great feature is that these can also be expanded with the subwoofer with support for automatic crossover, where everything under 80, which is your typical sub frequencies, will get pushed over to the sub automatically. Furthermore, if you want to go the wireless route, it also supports Bluetooth 4.2. I do want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to give me some recommendations for what speakers to get. These are absolutely incredible and I couldn't be happier with how they sound and look. I'll play some demo songs at the end, but for now, let's get back to the project. So it's finally time to get everything set up. I'll start with my active speaker, which will be the one on the right side that will be receiving the main power. Then the left side will be my passive speaker that gets connected using the included speaker wires that we've already fed through the desk and pipes previously in the video. Once this is done, I'll go ahead and move the PC back in place. Now since I did have to cut the power cord to the speakers to be able to feed it through the desk, I'll quickly go over what I did to get them reconnected. I first found this white electrical box on Amazon that'll be perfect for the job. I'm going to drill a couple holes on either side of the box. Then I'll feed both ends of the cut power cord through the holes, which I've already stripped back the smaller cables inside. From here, it's just reconnecting the same colored wires together using Wago clips, closing the box up, and mounting it underneath so that it's not hanging down. I did go ahead and clean up the wires in the back a little bit using some mesh sleeves that do a good enough job of covering up the different colored wires to give everything an overall cleaner look. And the last thing I'll be doing is applying some white matte paint by hand to cover up the silver screws that I used to secure everything together. Now as I'm finishing up, you may be wondering how I'm going to get power plus control the LED strips that's going to be lighting up the acrylic. I'll simply be connecting them to the power unit that's already underneath the desk and using a separate pin on one of my 4 ESP32 devices that I have loaded with WLED and mounted underneath. And I won't go over this process of getting things hooked up since you can just watch the complete DIY video I made of getting the desk set up, which goes over all this in detail. So that about does it for this project. I'll leave you with some final pictures and videos of everything set up. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I hope you have a blessed day. So Nanoleaf at a recent live stream launch event teased a ton of new products, and today I'll be going over their all new blocks that by the end of this video, I can almost guarantee you're going to be blown away by every aspect of what they're able to pull off with this new offering. Opening things up, you have the getting started information with all the instructions. Underneath, you have the first large block that this kit has. The dimensions are about 9 inches by 9 inches by just over 1 inch thick. On the back, you have a total of 8 slots for your connector pieces and a gray colored mounting bracket, all of which I'll be going over in detail. There's an additional 3 more of these large panels before getting to the smaller blocks. These are roughly 4.5 by 4.5 inches by just over 1 inch thick and have 4 connector slots for the attachments and a smaller gray mounting bracket on the back. Next, you have their pegboard square that's made of metal and has the same dimensions as the large blocks. This is definitely heavier than their other panels, and I'll be going over what that means in terms of installation. Then you have a shelf that you can incorporate into the setup if you're wanting to display any of your collectibles or plants or whatever else you might want to showcase. They also include 2 hooks for the pegboard unit, the controller, a 42-volt 1-amp power supply, some mounting hardware meant for the shelf and pegboard, the connector pieces that link the blocks together allowing for power and data to travel from one unit to the next, and finally a bunch of sticky pads. You can also get textured panels like I have here. These are the exact same as the large squares, but the diffuser has a geometric type design with higher and lower points instead of being perfectly flat like the others. So the first point that needs to be discussed is the engineering behind this product. You have the ability to take off the diffuser cover on every block, which is meaningful for a couple reasons. First is that you can swap covers around without having to move the entire unit. They have the textured and flat covers now, but I imagine in the future they could easily come out with new designs and hopefully even a black LED diffuser. Second is that we can easily see what's underneath, and thankfully the LEDs are evenly distributed throughout the entire surface, meaning there should be no hot spots. Furthermore, and what I personally think is one of the smartest mounting designs I've ever seen on a product, is this gray bracket that can be separated from the main unit. What's genius about this is you'll put all the sticky pads on the back, but the pull tabs are still accessible, so when it comes time to take things down if you're perhaps moving, or if you want to rebuild a design, or if you're renting, these can easily come off without damaging your wall. Moving on, you have the snap connector pieces that allow you to link everything together in whatever pattern you want. Again, these clips are what allows the power and data to be sent from one panel to the next. I'll put a couple together here so you can get the general idea of how it works. Now it's time to get them added to my setup, and as you can see, I'm running out of room. Ideally, I'd be starting out with a blank slate so I could really get creative with the design, but taking down the dragon scales to make room for these made the most sense. Fortunately, I made the smart decision when putting these up to only use some 3M sticky tape instead of screwing everything in, so it was pretty simple to take them down. So now that I have some free space, I started by putting up one of the large blocks. Make sure to use a level on this first one because it will act as a guide for all the others. Once it's up, this is a great example of the amazing mounting system. I can snap the main unit off, which gives me access to the sticky pads underneath in case I ever wanted to take it down. Getting everything else set up is incredibly fast as you're just adding one block after the other in whatever design you want. I do have 2 separate kits that I'm combining into one in case you're wondering where the extra blocks are coming from, since you can have up to 17 large panels or 60 small squares or a combination of the 2 while only using one power supply. And since I know there'll definitely be some people that want to max things out, each controller does support up to 500 blocks, but you will definitely need to use more than one power unit for larger setups like that. Once everything's looking good, I'll be adding the power and controller, and what I love about this is these 2 things are completely separate. Oftentimes the power and controller are combined into one thing, but here you can put each item wherever you want that makes the most sense. I'm going to be connecting the power all the way on the right hand side so I can hide it behind the cubby, and this can be attached to any of the regular connection slots in the back of the panels. And for the controller, this can go anywhere you want, and for this setup, I'm going to be putting it on the left hand side. So the options are endless on what you can do with the pegboards, and being that they're magnetic, you can get really creative on how you want to attach things. I'm going to keep things simple and move my 2 Elite controllers over here since I think it'll look good against the RGB backdrop. I also recently bought all new real plants since many people hated the fake ones, so I'll get those added as well to brighten things up a little bit. Now as far as the pegboards, since these are heavier, Nanoleaf does say you should get these screwed into the wall. I'm personally not worried about things holding, so I won't be doing this, but I still wanted to show you all the process in case you did. You can unscrew the metal frame to remove the pegboard. Underneath, you'll see the diffuser as well as 4 holes that you can use a pencil to mark the spots. Next, snap off the unit, which leaves you with only the gray mounting bracket left. From here, you can use the drill bit to make a hole at the 4 spots you marked. Insert your drywall plugs, reattach the main unit, screw things into the drywall plugs with the included hardware, and then tighten the pegboard back in place. Moving on to the shelf, and this is pretty similar to the pegboards. These can go anywhere you want, and I'll quickly show you the general idea. Let's say I wanted to put this between 2 panels. I'll snap off the top one, and the shelf can slide behind the bottom unit. I can mark out the 2 spots above, which I can then drill, use the drywall anchors, and secure the same way as the pegboards before reattaching the top panel. I won't be using the shelf in this setup, but I did test things out with the Karuko figure without screwing anything in, and it held up just fine to the point where I would probably skip this step unless I was wanting to display something pretty heavy. And in my opinion, this product has to be considered the gold standard when it comes to installation, and I hope you're beginning to see just how much thought they put into all the little things prior to even turning on the lights. Once everything's plugged in, let's get it all set up. First, download and install the Nanoleaf app. On the top right, click the 3 dots and go to Add Device. You can scan the QR code on the front of the setup guide to begin the pairing process. It'll first have you put in your Wi-Fi information, assign it to a room or create new, give it a name. It'll automatically detect your exact layout and you can move it to the correct orientation, click finish, and you're all set. Now in the app, I'm under scenes right now where you can try out some of the ones I already have, or you can go to discover and download other ones that you want to try out. One of my favorite features on the app though is back in scenes, hit the plus icon and then paint. Scroll down and choose the color palette that you want to work with, or you can create a new one. After you've found one that you like, you can then individually paint every single block to whatever color you want. When you have everything how you like it, you can hit save or begin to play around with the motion tab and animate different types of movement. And make sure to hit the settings for each movement because a lot of times you can adjust the direction of the effect as well as the speed and fade. Under motion, you also have the ability to choose different sound react animations. My favorite is the paint splatter, and this works extremely well in picking up my voice and changing the blocks simultaneously.
Testing. Check, check. Test, test, test. Hello? Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Check, check, check.
Next, I want to highlight what a lot of people might not even know exists, which is the Nanoleaf desktop app for Windows or Mac. I downloaded and installed the program, and above and beyond being able to do all the same things that the app can do, this desktop version has some additional functionality that takes things to the next level. On the left-hand side, go into Orchestrator, then on the top right, under Devices, I'm going to select Blocks. Turn the Orchestrator feature on, then below Customize, I thought Energize was the best one, and then you can select the color palette that you want to use. What this does is capture audio being played through your computer and it'll have the blocks react in real time. This means that it doesn't matter how noisy of an environment you're in, the lights are only going to react to the sound coming from your PC and not the ambient noise in the room like a traditional mic will pick up. This is something they talked about in their live stream, and I can definitely say that whatever algorithm they're using, it's the best iteration of a sound react system I've ever seen in a plug-and-play setup. Now, I did want to quickly mention that I just started a Patreon account, and I want to thank all my supporters who help contribute directly to the channel. Every little bit helps me get closer to my dream of being able to make videos full-time, and your support means the world to me. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'm truly blown away by your generosity. Another feature that I think will get used a lot is their AI-generated scenes. Just type in what you're going for, and it'll match the colors to what it feels best represents the prompt. It definitely nailed the neon lights look, and I followed it up by putting in autumn leaves, and again, it was exactly what I had in mind in terms of a color palette. From here, I'm going to start getting this set up back by moving the desk and reconnecting the PC and speakers. As I'm moving everything in place, I kind of thought this was going to happen since I didn't have much room to go higher with the blocks, but I'm not loving the location of the pegboards and controllers. This brings up another awesome example of the versatility of the plug-and-play system that they developed. All I have to do is take down the pegboard blocks and swap them to whatever spot I want to move them to, and if at any point I didn't like them here or wanted to move them again, I can do this all in a matter of minutes. So this next part is my absolute favorite thing about the blocks. Go back to the desktop app and click on Gaming. From here you'll want to adjust and resize the design and move it to the position on the rectangle which represents your PC screen to where you want it to mirror the colors. On the right hand side, I like the 4D settings the best, and once that's done, turn on the screen mirror functionality to begin. And it truly is amazing how dramatically this is able to change the feel of a space. I was completely mesmerized by this feature and went through many of my favorite background wallpapers, lo-fi channels, and different YouTube videos testing the functionality. My mind is already thinking how fun it would be to put these up all around a room, put on a lo-fi channel with some awesome background images, and relax as all the colors around me change to match the vibe. So that about does it for this one. I'll leave you with some final pictures and videos, but I did want to give a big shout out to Nanoleaf. This truly is a special product that's unlike anything else currently out there, and the attention to detail and execution is definitely appreciated. Thank you all for watching, and as always, I hope you have a blessed day.
Quiet streets where the night feels still. Echoes fade in the space we fill. Moonlight paints on the city walls. We're just shadows, but we stand so tall. Breathe in the moment, let it flow. In this silence we both know time moves slow, but it's alright. We're just drifting through the night.
So a lot of my projects start out at Home Depot, and this one was no different. I ended up buying 3 of these 8-foot long melamine shelves for about $24 each. Next, I'm going to take one of the 3 shelves and cut them down to size depending on how tall you want the media console to be. And after all was said and done, I think I ended up needing about 8 of these pieces. For this next step, I'll be making 2 separate shallow channels using the table saw with all the pieces we just cut that I have clamped together here. And the groove I'm making is going to be about 1/4 inch deep and a little under 3/4 of an inch wide. Now take one of those pieces and use it as a guide to make marks on one of the 8-foot long boards as to where our next cut will be. So for here, and looking back, I have no idea why on earth I decided to do this inside, but I'll be using a 3/4 inch, and I believe it's called a mortising router bit, to make 2 channels down the entire length of one side of the board at a depth of 1/4 inch. And here I'll be doing the same thing for the other groove. So this is where your personal preference is going to come in as far as how wide you want the spacings to be. And when you're coming up with a plan here, make sure to take into consideration the size of the items you'll be displaying. Next, I'll be measuring and marking the board, so when I flip things up to begin securing, I won't have to remeasure and can simply line things up with the marks. Since I'm not too worried about making this super strong, I'm just going to be using some 1.5 inch brad nails to secure things together, but you could certainly drill pilot holes and use traditional screws if you wanted to make things more sturdy. And here I've already flipped the board around and started putting nails in on the other side, and I'll be putting one more in down the middle as well. Next is the fun part. I'll be using these super shallow diffuser channels from Amazon that come from a company called Nuzada, and they're going to work perfect for this build. You can get them in black or silver, and being that I had some leftover black ones from a previous project, I'll be using that color. So these diffuser channels are super light, and I don't want to have to deal with screwing them down, so I'm just going to use a little bit of wood glue, and that should keep them in there just fine. As for the LEDs, I'm going to be using some SK6812 strips from BTF Lighting that have 60 LEDs per meter, and I'm going with these since they have a separate LED to control the white color which I want for this build. And if you're at all curious on how to get the LED strip to look like this, I made a how-to solder tutorial that breaks things down on the basics and shows close-up footage of how easy soldering actually is. But if you didn't want to go this route, you could just use one of Govi's new M1 strips that I've already done a couple videos on going over how versatile the product is for a plug-and-play solution. Here I'm going to be removing the sticky tape from the 2 identical strips that I've made and securing them into the channels. And these channels also come with a diffuser cover that you may or may not choose to use. I would recommend experimenting with them on or off and see what you like best. I'm going to be running these two strips in parallels. That means the data will be split coming from the controller and both the lights will do the exact same thing at the exact same time. I'll show you how to get everything wired up, and for reference, the red wires are my voltage, the black is the ground, and the blue and yellow will be my data. Traditionally, the data line is green, but I ran out of that color, so I just used what I had left. And one other thing to quickly point out is that there's little arrows on the LED strips that indicate what direction the data is going. Make sure those arrows on both strips are pointing in this direction. Now I mentioned the controller, and I'll be using WLED installed on an ESP32 Wi-Fi board, and you can check out the video I already made going over those simple steps to get things set up. And in the soldering video that I already mentioned, I go over how to get the wires connected to the pins like you're seeing here. But for this device, the red wire is my voltage, white is my ground, and green is data. So this is actually really simple, but it might look complex due to all the wires, but I'll try to make it as easy as possible to follow. First, I'm going to take two additional wires and I'm going to attach the red one to one of the three positive terminals on the power supply. And for reference, I'm using an extra 5V 30 amp unit that I had laying around. Next, I'm going to take a 5-slot wiggle connector and insert and snap in place the red positive wire coming from the power unit. Now I'm simply going to take all the other red wires, 2 from the LED strips and 1 from the ESP device, and a slot will not be needed. Now I'm going to take my additional black wire and put it into the first negative terminal on the power supply, and I'll be doing the exact same thing we just did, but this time all the ground wires will go into the connector, which are the 2 black ones from the LED strips and the white one from the ESP device. And finally, the green data wire coming from the controller will be put into a Wago connector, as well as the data lines coming from the LED strips, which are my blue and yellow cables. Now I just need to go ahead and set the LED board on top, and I'll again be using my brad nailer to attach. And to finish off the back, I got this from Home Depot. I'm not even sure what it's called, but one side is a glossy white finish and the other side is black. I'll be securing this to the back, but make sure that the white side is facing in. The last thing I'm going to do is just use some basic white cord cover and drill a couple holes on the bottom to feed my wires through to better help hide them from view so they can be placed out of sight behind the console. This is also another plus of using Wago connectors, as you can snap and unsnap the wires in seconds. And if you want to clean up your cut edges where the wood is exposed, you certainly can just paint it white, or you can get this white melamine edge banding that goes on with the hot iron. I'm still not sure what I'll be doing, but at least those are a couple options I'll have. So at this point I'm pretty much done. I just have to get things plugged in and I'm ready to go. Now, what I'm about to go over with you today is absolutely going to blow your mind, so buckle up because this is one you're not going to want to miss. To kick things off, I'm going to create a couple more DIY custom elements to add to my current setup, and I really want this video to capture what's possible, so I'm definitely going to go overboard in hopes of giving you some ideas. First, I'll be using my favorite milky white diffuser channels from Mazada and installing them around the outside edges of the screen. These are my go-to profiles because you can get them in 1 or 2 meter long lengths, black or aluminum in color, and they perfectly diffuse strips that have 60 LEDs per meter. To get them installed, I'm going to be using some removable 3M sticky pads to avoid using the mounting hardware. Now, another thing to mention is that these channels can be cut to size as well as cut at angles using a miter saw or just a regular hand saw if you really wanted to do a custom install. So as I'm getting these set up, I do want to point out that even though I'll be using this on my 120-inch ALR screen with the UST projector setup, this method will work on any size screen, any type of projector, as well as any size or type of TV or monitor. Now, once the profiles are up, it's time to move on to the lights, and you can pretty much use any addressable LEDs that you want, but my personal favorite option, especially on smaller type designs like this, continue to be the 5V SK6812 strips, which is what I'll be using here. And if you've never heard of this type before, what makes it unique is you get all the individually addressable RGB color options with the added bonus of a dedicated white diode. I'll go ahead and get the LED strip set up in the channel and work my way around the perimeter. I ended up needing a little over 500 LEDs to cover the distance, and while there are certainly many ways to connect strips together without needing to solder, I'll always put a plug-in for learning this skill if you think tinkering with LEDs might be a hobby you're wanting to explore. I'll leave a link to my Soldering for Beginners video I made that goes over all the basics with extreme close-up footage and commentary if it's something you're interested in checking out. And finally, once the strip is in place, I'll finish by tidying up the wires and then snapping on the milky white diffuser covers. Now, the next thing I wanted to incorporate was some edge-lit LED acrylic. I have used this before and the effects are incredible. I won't go into too much detail on the product since you can watch the full-length unboxing and setup I already did, or another video where I made some LED signs with it if you're wanting a more closer look at the design. For the lights on this one, I'll be using the iconic WS2812B LEDs that have 100 pixels per meter. I would use the SK6812 for these as well, but I couldn't find them in 100 per meter density, and the 144 per meter strips are too wide to fit the channels. So as far as this product, it is marketed as an LED baseboard system, which I do think there's many other use cases for it, but I thought how cool would it be if you could swap out your wood baseboards for these and have them react to your TV in real time. Once that's done, the next step is to get all of our lights set up with WLED, and my guess is if you're watching this, you're already very familiar and comfortable with that easy process. However, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'll leave links to the easy tutorial videos I've already made on how to get everything set up and connected to WLED. This is something anyone with any skill level can do, and I've done complete walkthroughs on getting started using a basic ESP32 device or a couple products that come pre-installed with WLED that'll have you up and running in less than 60 seconds. I now have everything set up to hopefully give you all a good glimpse of what's possible, and this is where the fun really begins. Let's fast forward tonight and pull up the WLED app to quickly turn each of the areas on, starting with what I labeled ALR screen, baseboard lights, floor to ceiling, and media console. So to get started, I'm going to turn on my projector that I have connected to my PC, which I'll get into later, and I'll turn off all the lights except for the media console. Now, the thing that's going to make this all come together is a program called Signal RGB, and if you're a gamer, there's no doubt you've already heard of this because it makes all your peripherals, regardless of brand, make, or model, work under one roof, but they recently came out with WLED support, which is going to absolutely blow your mind. Once you've downloaded and opened the program, go under Install and make sure to click the Screen Ambient setting. Then, under My Effects, go to Customize, and on the right you have different picture modes that you should definitely play around with, my personal favorite being HD, followed closely by Standard. Next, go to Network on the left-hand side, and this is where you're going to find support for some of the major, what I would call non-PC component companies and programs. I haven't yet played around with the Govia integration and some of the other ones, although it's definitely something I will be looking into here in the near future and making a video on if people are interested. Keep scrolling down until you see WLED and select it. Signal RGB automatically scanned for any lights and found all 4 areas it had already set up and running on WLED. You can also search and add by the IP taken directly from the WLED app, which is found right here. And another thing I recommend doing that you'll thank me for later is to go back into the WLED app, choose one of your lights, click configure, and go into Wi-Fi, and then give it a unique name right above the client IP address. And finally hit save and connect. Signal RGB will pull that name and put it right here so you know exactly what lights you're dealing with. And to make this as easy to follow as possible, we'll go through these one at a time, starting with the media console. Go ahead and click link, and as soon as you do, you'll notice that our media console is now connected. From here, click on devices and you can see all of our PC components, but we want to click on the WLED icon to get our media console dialed in. With the light bulb, I can control the brightness like I'm doing here. But what I need to do next is found directly underneath in the icon that has the 3 dots connected with lines. So what you're seeing here is the program already pulled the number of LEDs we have set up from WLED, and it usually defaults to creating a segment around half that number, which is why you see 74 here. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete this default segment, and as soon as I do that, the lights are going to go red, and then I need to click the plus to tell Signal RGB how many lights I actually want. And I'm starting with the media console because it's super easy. I want all 148 lights to be one segment, so I put 148 in the LED count and hit create. And as soon as I do that, Signal RGB is now sending data to the entire strip instead of the 74 LEDs it was doing before. You'll notice though that it's not quite right in terms of mirroring the screen, which brings me to the real magic. Under My Rig, go into Layouts and you're going to see a whole mess of all the things connected to Signal RGB. On the right, scroll down until you find Media Console and expand. Right-click on Custom Strip and choose Hide Other Devices to make it easier to see. You're presented with the line on the screen that represents your segment of 148 LEDs that you can now move to anywhere you want. And since my media console is on the floor, naturally I'm going to want it to mirror any colors that are at the bottom of my screen. You also have the ability to increase or decrease the size of the line as well as rotate it in any direction, allowing you to dial things into perfection. So by now, if you're anything like me, you probably have goosebumps. Being able to this easily map any lights running WLED to any part of my screen with zero coding just doesn't seem real. I'll move things around a little bit more to get them to a spot that looks like it's perfectly lined up with the green and blue lights that I have set as my desktop wallpaper before moving on to our next area. I'm now going to set up the floor to ceiling lights, so let's go back to Network, scroll down to WLED, and link those to Signal RGB. I do want to back up for a second though and give a little bit of context. These corner lights obviously are extended beyond the screen, which is fine, but for best results, I wish I didn't have these bottom areas since it doesn't exactly match to a space on the screen. So with that being said, here's what you can do. Go to Devices and you'll see our recently added floor to ceiling lights that we can click on. Then I'll again be deleting the default segment that was created, and this time I'm going to first create a custom segment that has 35 LEDs, which will correspond to the LEDs that are in this area. Next, I'll create another segment that has 100 lights that will be for this section. I'll do a third segment that again has 35 and will be for the bottom right portion, and then a fourth segment where I accidentally put an extra light that will be at 101. Now before mapping things out, you can actually go into the settings for each of our created segments, and in this particular scenario, I'm going to turn the lights off for the ones we designated at 35. After that, let's head over to Layouts, find the floor to ceiling lights on the right hand side, left click on one of our segments and hide other devices, so we're left with our one strip. So for this one, since the lights are going vertical, I'll need to rotate the segment to match the orientation, and then again, it's just moving things around and playing with the size to get things perfectly synced up. Once the left side's complete, I can then do the same thing for the right. From here, let's go ahead and set up the baseboard lights, and by now you're probably getting the hang of things. I'll link it together and then go to Devices to set up the segments, but there is one thing I want to highlight that's important. Since this is our high density 100 LED per meter strip, there's a total of 247 lights. And as of now, when you create a segment like we've been doing, it lets you have a max of 150 pixels per segment. So since I need to get to 247, I'll just create one segment with 123 lights and then a second segment with 124 to get to the total. There is a way around this, but it's a little bit too in-depth for what I'm wanting to cover in this video, so doing it this way will work just fine. Heading back over to Layouts, this is where the resize function is so crucial because I can have the one strip that represents about half my total lights sized down to cover about half the screen, and then do the same thing for the other segment. And I hope you're really beginning to appreciate just how easy it is to customize every aspect of whatever lighting components you've incorporated. And finally, we can get the lights around the ALR screen set up. Once they're linked together, I again have to do a little bit of tweaking due to the 150 limit. You can split things up however you want, but for my first segment, which starts here and goes this way, I'll be doing the max of 150. This, however, leaves 10 LEDs left to finish the run, which will be my segment 2. Going up, I can do the total of 93, then at the top going right, I'll do another 150, followed by 10, and then finishing things up with 93 going back down. Let's head back over to the layouts and start mapping out each segment to the corresponding location. And because these lights are so close to our screen, you can see just how accurate the color mapping is. Now as I'm finishing up getting these calibrated, I hope your mind is starting to think of all that can be done with this. You can literally build anything you want using your favorite addressable LEDs and put them anywhere in your setup. And this really hits home for me because before this was a thing, on every video I did when showcasing the final results, I would manually change all my lights to something that matched the theme of what was on the screen to make everything look cohesive. And as you can probably imagine, not having to do that anymore makes me extremely happy. So just like that, we've mapped out all of our lights to the exact areas I want. Now go ahead and click the save icon, give the layout a name, and then save it. This is awesome because if you end up watching any widescreen type content that has a black bar going across the top and bottom, I can change the layout to match the format, save it, and then go back and forth as needed. Now as far as getting the signal to the projector, or in many cases what will more than likely be a TV, I tested things out on just a regular HDMI cord run from the PC to the projector, which worked perfectly. But I also bought about 4 different wireless HDMI transmitters, and this is the one that ended up working the best. And if you want a more complete rundown on this product, let me know and I can put together a full video, but it really is plug and play and a pretty straightforward setup process. Now I've really just scratched the surface of all that Signal RGB is able to do, and everything I've done in this video is available via their free application, as well as hundreds of other awesome RGB effects. And if there's enough interest, I could very well see myself doing some deeper dive tutorials of this program down the road. Another nice thing is that they have a very active and dedicated Discord community, so make sure to follow them there to get help with any questions you might have along your journey. Now, at least for me, what I enjoy most about this setup is being able to throw up a cool image or lo-fi YouTube channel on the screen, instantly having the entire room match the vibe, put on some music, and just chill out after what usually is a stressful day at my normal job. And having a space like this to unwind, even if it's just for 15 minutes, really does make a difference for me. So that about does it for this one, but I hope you enjoy the final footage, and as always, thank you for your continued support. Now recently I had a crazy idea for a way I could install some floor-to-ceiling corner ambient lighting that's both budget and renter friendly, so without further ado, let's begin. It all started when I saw this brand new LED profile, and within a couple minutes of having it in hand, I knew it was going to be a game changer, which I'll get into later. Now this is marketed as a simple wall decor lighting product, but with the way it's designed, the sky's the limit on the way it can be used. It allows for 2 LED strips to run across from each other, it comes with milky white diffuser covers, but the real genius of this is found in the mounting system. It comes with these basic brackets that you can screw into any surface, which then snap in place on the profile, giving you perfect space underneath to run power injection wires if needed. This, to me, looks like the perfect product to hopefully in the near future try installing around the entire perimeter of my room as either a crown molding type of look around the ceiling or at the bottom as baseboard trim. But ironically, for what I have in mind today, since I want this to be renter friendly with no drilling in walls, I won't be doing anything with the mounting hardware. So my ideas, like they often do, led me to my local hardware store, and after roaming the aisles for about 30 minutes, I came across some molding trim pieces I think will do the job. And things don't always work out this smoothly, but the wood ended up being the exact same size I needed to fit perfectly into the space that's meant for the mounting hardware like you can see here without having to do any additional modifications. Now that I knew it fits great, I needed to make the wood section a little bit longer to match the height of my room. I did a quick estimate of how much extra I needed, cut things with my miter saw, glued the pieces together, and let dry overnight. Then I'll take our now longer section and slide it up into place against the floor and ceiling. This is easy to do since I have carpet, which is able to be compressed slightly, but even if you have hard floors, the wood pieces are naturally able to bend a little bit, so it shouldn't be very difficult to get a perfect fit. And zooming in, you can see I have it about 5 inches away from the corner, but you can move it in closer or further away depending on what you think looks best. Now that the frame's in place, I can go ahead and attach the aluminum profiles. And what's great about this method is that since I'm using the wood, the channels are going to line up perfectly with one another, creating a near seamless look. Once I have the 2 sections up, I have a little gap left over. I'm going to take a quick measurement and again use my miter saw to make the cut, but if you didn't have one of these, a hacksaw would get the job done. I'll be using the default blade that the saw came with, and as you can see, you're left with a very clean cut. I'll go ahead and put that in place and we can now move on to the lighting component. For this, I'll be using my all-time favorite 5V SK6812 LEDs. These give you all the benefits of individually controllable colors with the added bonus of a dedicated white diode. Now the first thing I need to do is attach some longer wires that'll eventually run to the controller, and there are many different ways you could go about doing this. The easiest option would be to just cut off the beginning JST connector, strip back the wires, use some WAGO connectors to splice in whatever additional length is needed, and you're all set. But I'm also a big fan of soldering, and it's definitely a good skill to learn if you're getting into LEDs, so that's what I'll be doing here. Now if you're curious on this process, definitely check out my Soldering for Beginners video I made that goes over everything I'm about to do with detailed commentary and extreme close-up footage. So once I have the one strip done, I'm going to do the exact same thing one more time since this profile is meant for 2 LED strips. After that step, we can cut the lights to the length needed and attach them to the channel. And it ended up being a little bit easier to do this with the frame not being upright. Here I'm installing the first strip, after which I'll move on to the second one on the opposite side of the profile. And to make my life easier when eventually getting everything connected to the controller, right here I'm just marking which ones are my voltage, data, and ground wires that you can easily find marked on the LED strip itself. After everything's marked up, I'll put the frame back upright. And as far as cable management, I'll use some basic cable concealer tracks to run the wires along the baseboard until it gets behind my center console and out of sight. The last thing to cover is how to get everything wired up, and I'll quickly go over this process using 3 different products. My personal favorite, the domestic automation board, the Eric City controller, and finally an ESP32 module. For the domestic automation board, I'm first going to attach some short wires to the spring-loaded block system, red for voltage, white for ground, and green for data. Then I'll attach 3-slot WAGOs to each of the 3 wires. And to make things easier to follow, I'm going to use these 2 sets of wires to represent the wires that are attached to the beginning of my LED strips that are on the profiles. Red represents voltage, green for data, and white for ground. From here, it's as simple as getting all the wires connected with their corresponding colors. And what I'm doing with this setup is called splitting the data to run my lights in parallel, which means both of my LED strips will do the exact same thing at the exact same time because the same data signal is being sent to both runs. And lastly, I'll be plugging in my 5V 10A supply to the board and you're all set. And this product is going to be what I end up using for the demo at the end. Now for the Eric City controller, it's much of the same process. I'll first attach my short wires to one of the 2 outputs and add the 3-slot WAGOs to the end. Then connect the rest of the wires that are representing the lines coming from my 2 LED strips. This is again splitting the data just like from the previous example and will have the same effect of both lines doing the same thing at the same time. I'll plug in the 5V 10A unit and you're good to go. And And finally, for the ESP32 module, I'm going to put one jumper wire in the GND pin and another connected to the D2 pin for data. I'll then use a 3-slot WAGO and attach it to the male end of our data jumper. Next, I'm going to take a 5-volt 10-amp supply, and after cutting off the barrel connector and stripping back the wires, you're left with the red and black line, which I'll be adding 5-slot WAGOs to each. From here, all that's left to do is get the red voltage wires combined, the white ground wires connected to the black line from the power, and the green data wires all combined coming off the controller. I then have to connect the ground coming from the ESP32 to the others, since all of these do have to be common. Finally, I'll be using a micro USB cord and plug to power the actual ESP32 module, and this setup will be done. Now to control the lights, I'll be using WLED. This free program comes pre-installed on the domestic automation and Eric City controllers, but you do need to install it on the ESP32. I've already made a complete walkthrough of that process that you can check out if interested, as well as many other videos on the ins and outs of WLED. I'll leave links to all those relevant videos in the description that I highly recommend watching if this is your first time hearing about WLED. So I ended up making another one of these for my other corner, and when combined with the media console project from before, I'm super happy with how everything turned out considering the minimal work required for this build. Now that about does it for this one. I'll leave you with some final footage of everything in action, including some new screen mirror software I've been playing around with that's compatible with WLED. But I hope you enjoyed this project, and as always, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a blessed day. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to go from a blank wall with one power outlet right here at the bottom to creating a simple and clean entertainment setup with no visible wires. Now the first thing I did was paint this back wall white. I'm for sure going to be adding some backlighting to the TV, and I know from experience that colors 100% look best when they're reflecting off a white surface. I'll eventually paint the entire room white, but for now I'll just be doing this one surface where everything will be set up. Next, I picked up a floating media console from Wayfair. The actual assembly process was pretty straightforward and the instructions were easy to follow, but the mounting proved to be challenging, which I'll go over later in this video. I would recommend though, if you have the space for it, to go bigger than what I went with. Since I want to have this centered, I still have to be able to open the door on the left, and 71 inches is about the max length I could go, but I think something in the 90-inch range would be ideal for what will be a 65-inch TV. And since I don't yet know where I want everything to be positioned, I'll put the media console on a couple paint cans and push it up against the wall to better visualize the end result. As far as the TV, I'll use some painter's tape to mark out the perimeter to where I think it might look best. This next part is tricky because TV mounts should be anchored to the studs, but in my scenario, if I were to do that, the TV wouldn't be centered to where I want it on the wall in terms of left and right placement. So what I ended up doing was to span some wooden boards across the wall that will then be attached to the studs. Then the wall mount can be secured at any place along those added sections instead of having to rely on the location of the studs. Moving on, it's time to tackle what's probably the most important part of having a cable-free setup, and that's adding an outlet up by the TV. And before working on anything electrical, make sure to cut power off at the breaker. I'll then be removing the old outlet by disconnecting the live, neutral, and ground wires. Now I immediately noticed that this is not your traditional size box. I'm in my basement and the cement foundation is a lot closer than what the usual depth of a 2x4 would be. This isn't a huge deal, but it will make for a slightly more challenging installation process compared to being able to use a regular size junction container. From here, I'll go up towards where the TV will be and mark out the perimeter of the box I'll be adding and then cutting it out with the drywall saw. Now that I have the opening, I can run my standard 14.2 NM cabling down to the bottom. And a lot of different ways you could get the wiring down, but a while back I picked up the Magnipole and that's been working out great. It's basically an extremely strong magnet that you can attach your wires to, which you can then guide down from the outside of the wall using the magnetic roller. Once we get things through, I'll show a close-up of the outlet. On one side you have your brass colored screws like you're seeing here. This is the side where your black live wires will get connected. On the other side you have your silver screws, and this is where the white neutral lines go. And the green screw at the bottom is where you'll connect the grounds. Next I'll be stripping back the wires that we just ran down from above in order to get things prepped for hooking them up to the wall plug. I'll feed both sets of wires through the top of the box, and then we can finally start getting everything connected. I personally like the option of screwing these underneath the little plate like I'm doing here versus the hook around the screw option that the old style plug had. You can really crank down on these to get an extremely tight connection. With all the wires now connected, I can put the box back in place, which was previously secured to the cement foundation using some concrete screws that at some point someone would have had to use a masonry bit to drill. And if you have the space, definitely use a traditional size outlet box like you're seeing now. A lot of these are able to secure to the drywall, which is a lot easier than trying to secure these to the cement foundation, but I couldn't find this style in the shallow depth unit that I had to use. Moving up to the top, this is a lot easier since I only have one set of wires to deal with. I'll get the live, neutral, and ground connected and put everything back together. In case you're wondering how I secured this into the hole since it's not butted up against a stud, I did use a masonry bit to drill small holes into the concrete foundation that I was able to screw the back of the box into. Now as for a TV, my old Vizio broke about a year ago, and ever since then I've been saving up for something new. I went back and forth between the LG C4 and the Sony Bravia 8, but after doing a bunch of research, I decided to go with Sony. Once I had everything unboxed, I started to get the mounting brackets installed, and this is when I realized I had already made a huge mistake. I assumed that the mounting hardware would be installed right in the center of the TV, however, it's located much more towards the bottom. Now, one of my many flaws is I don't think things through before I start on something, and this is a perfect example. This should have been the very first thing I did before doing anything on the wall. And at this point, I knew the TV was going to be much higher on the wall than what I had planned out, and sure enough, once I had it up, it was a solid 6 or 7 inches higher than what I wanted. And I'll admit, the idea of taking everything down and essentially starting over was too much, so I thought instead I could just raise the media console higher so there'd be less of a gap. I even started screwing in the mounting brackets for the media console much higher, which meant the bottom outlet would be below the console instead of in it like I originally wanted. And after seeing how things looked, I realized I had the brackets spaced too close together, so I had to move them further out. Then somehow I snapped the head of a screw off and it was embedded in the wall. I had to dig out a big chunk of drywall to fit a pliers in there to get it pulled back out. So at least for me, almost every DIY project that I do has at least one of these moments that I'm currently experiencing right now. My wall is completely torn up, I'm tired, I'm annoyed at myself for not planning things out better, and I'm wondering why I even thought I should attempt to do this myself in the first place. I had officially hit rock bottom, and what you're looking at right now is a very defeated man. However, after some intense internal dialogue with myself and some Culvers, I took a deep breath and decided to forge on with my original plan, which meant I had to almost completely start over. I took the TV down, I removed the mount off the wall, I moved both sections of wood lower and re-screwed them into the studs. I then reattached the TV mount to the boards, and finally I put the TV back on the brackets. Despite my wall being completely torn up, this is more what I had in mind from a layout perspective, and I was glad I bit the bullet and redid everything. With the setup now coming together, it was time to cut out a spot for where my HDMI cables could run from the TV to the media console. I bought a couple wall plates off Amazon that are meant specifically for this type of thing. I measured out the sizes of the plate, cut a hole in the top as well as the bottom, which will be inside the media console. I ran some HDMI cables through using the same Magnipole system from before, and then put on the outer plates to give it a finished look. I then quickly caulked the baseboard since it had been a long time and they were definitely in need of some TLC. After that, I moved on to patching up all the holes in my wall, letting it dry, and giving it a fresh coat of paint. So I'm not sure if all floating media consoles are this much of a nightmare to install, but it was not easy and was probably the most time-consuming part of the project. If anyone has a different recommendation for one of these in which they had a pleasant mounting experience, please let me know. To be fair though, if I had the right tools it would have been much easier, but trying to attach the little screws from inside of the cubbies to the underside of the top piece was not easy doing it by hand since my drill didn't fit and I had minimal room to maneuver. Next I reattached the TV and tidied up the cables, and it was finally starting to look like a finished project. Now, if your house is like mine, you'll probably notice some gaps in between certain parts of the media console and the wall. Very rarely are walls perfectly flat, so you might see this as well. Instead of using some caulking for this, I used a thin white trim piece that I found on Amazon. I figured this would be less messy to take down if I ever wanted to change things up down the road. And finally, I drilled some small holes in the back of the media console using a Forstner bit to be able to run any wires from one cubby to the next and back to the power on the left-hand side. Now I hinted at this in the beginning of the video, but the reason I went with all white is because I absolutely love Ambilight setups. This is where you can install some lights around the back perimeter of the TV, and then those lights will automatically match and change with the colors on the screen, and once you've experienced this in person, I can almost promise you, you're going to be hooked. Fancy LEDs just released their brand new HDMI 2.1 kit that's currently the best option on the market for creating this type of immersion. After getting these installed, you can cut off any extra lights, connect the sync box to the TV, and then you can plug in up to 3 HDMI devices. I'll be connecting my PS5 and my Nvidia Shield, but it is compatible with anything HDMI, so if you have an Apple TV, Fire Stick, Chromecast, a PC, or anything else, it'll all work. And if you did want to see a much more detailed breakdown, I did a full-length review of this product that I definitely recommend checking out if interested. I did want to quickly mention that I just started a Patreon account, and I want to thank all my supporters who help contribute directly to the channel. Every little bit helps me get closer to my dream of being able to make videos full-time, and your support means the world to me. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'm truly blown away by your generosity. So I don't want to spoil the final results, but despite the many challenges, in the end, it was all worth it, and I absolutely love how it turned out. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the final pictures and videos.
Breathe in the moment, let it flow. In this silence, we both know time moves slow, but it's alright. We're just drifting through the night.
So Fancy LEDs has seemingly done the impossible and cracked the unbreakable code of what's prevented many people from jumping on the Ambilight bandwagon, which I'll get into later. What I have here is their brand new sync box, so let's jump right in. Opening things up, you have the instruction manual, 4 different types of wall plugs depending on your region, the brains of the operation, which is referred to as the sync box that offers 3 separate 2.1 HDMI ports capable of delivering 4K at 120Hz or 8K at 60. It supports HDR, Dolby Vision, and Atmos, and finally it supports VRR, ALLM, ARC, and CEC, making it the most versatile and complete sync box on the market today. Next you have the lights, and this is the other star of the show. They're using high-quality 12-volt WS2814 strips that have a crazy 96 LEDs per meter, whereas most other units are still using 60. This strip also has a dedicated white LED, which is a huge bonus that's going to immensely help out with color-matching lighter scenes. You then have the high-speed HDMI cable that connects the box to your TV, the corner mounting clips with included sticky pads, and then the 12-volt power supply. I know people usually like to see everything laid out, so here's all the items that come with this kit. Now to get things set up, you certainly don't have to take your TV down, but to make it easier for you all to see what's going on, I'll take it off the mount and set it on the floor. This setup is hot off the press, and I still need to take the plastic off the screen, but I wanted to wait until I did this so I didn't have to wipe off a bunch of fingerprints. And for context, my old Vizio 65-inch broke about a year ago, and I've been saving up since then, and finally, after going back and forth between the LG C4 and the Sony Bravia 8, I ended up going with Sony. So I'm going to start by adding the 4 corner pieces to the TV, and one thing I liked that they did was make these flexible, since many TVs, including this one, has slight curves around the edges. Next, we can get the LED strip installed, and what I love about this system is it's not a preset length depending on the size of your TV, which often leads to the lights not extending to the very edges. This is a continuous roll of LEDs that will cover every inch of space around the back. You can either start on the bottom left or bottom right and then go up and around. As I work my way up to the first corner, you'll see how the corner clips act as a guide to add a slight bend to the strip to make the turn. I'll continue along the way and finish up the last 2 turns before going down the home stretch. Once you get back to the beginning, you can cut the leftover LEDs off at any of the copper pad cut points along the strip. I'll zoom in a little closer so you can see how it looks. Now this is completely off topic, but I couldn't help myself. I took the leftover part of the LED strip that I just cut off and soldered on a JST connector. This is actually extremely easy to do, and I made a complete how to solder video for beginners that I highly recommend watching if this is ever something you're interested in trying. Once that was done, I took this new controller that I recently found on Amazon that works with either 5 or 12 volt strips by simply flipping the switch to whatever voltage you need, plugging in the power, connecting the lights, and you're all set. And again, since they are using some WS2814 strips in the WLED program, I can set the color order to BRG, swap the WNG, and I'm now able to use the leftover part of the lights in any other project I might do down the road. If you've never heard of WLED, it's a free program that you can use to control many different types of addressable lights just like I'm doing now. And if this looks fun, make sure to check out my channel because I've done many videos on this topic that I'm sure you'd enjoy. From here, I'll be getting the TV back on the wall mount in order to get everything plugged in. The first thing I'll do is plug in the included HDMI cord into the back of my TV and then connect it to the sync box using the far right port. Then I can plug in the LED strip into the USB-C slot like I'm doing now, get the power connected, and then connect up to 3 HDMI devices to the open slots. I'll be running my NVIDIA Shield and PS5 through here for testing. And depending on how much anxiety cables give you, you might want to tidy things up back here, but for me, as long as I can't see anything from the front, I'll sleep just fine at night. Now, once you download and set up the fancy LED app, the first thing you want to do is go to your settings and then select the correct orientation for where you installed the lights. Then, for when HDR content is being displayed, it lets you choose low, medium, or high saturation. And I thought high looked the best, so that's what I went with. Next, under the Sync tab, definitely play around with these settings, but I personally thought the sweet spot was brightness around 75%, diffusion mode set to high, and speed of diffusion around 60%. So the first thing I want to go over is how this performs in its primary responsibility, which is to replicate the colors on the screen as accurately as possible. And I won't leave you guessing, because when you combine the 96 LED per meter strip density with the ability to tap into a dedicated white light, you have bar none the best looking color matching capabilities of any sync box I've ever used. I had over 6 hours of demo footage recorded, and no matter what type of image or video was being displayed on the screen, I was constantly blown away at how perfectly the colors matched. And yes, you're absolutely going to want to go back and rewatch all your favorite shows or movies, or put on your favorite lo-fi channel and enjoy the added ambiance that these lights add to the space. The next thing I want to cover that's important to me is how are the lights able to perform when parts of the screen are darker or altogether black. If the screen is black, I want the lights to be completely off in that area, which other products have struggled with. You'll see that this kit is able to handle darker or black parts of the screen to perfection, with either lowering the brightness of the lights when the colors on the screen are dimmer, or altogether turning the lights off when the screen is extremely dark. In my mind, this performs in this area exactly how I want it to, which further adds to the immersive experience. The next crucial part we need to examine is if there's any lag, and what I mean by this is I don't want my eyes to be able to notice the colors on the screen changing sooner than the colors behind the TV. And again, after 6 hours of testing, there's absolutely no visible lag, and even on the quickest scenes, my eyes are telling me that everything is changing at the exact same time. Moving on to one of the biggest areas that sync boxes have struggled with is the light behind the TV becoming washed out when watching HDR content. Here I'm playing Lion King on Disney Plus with Dolby Vision enabled, and as you can see, the colors remain vibrant and saturated while HDR content is being displayed. I'll switch over to Spider-Man, which is playing in HDR10 format, and again the same thing. Colors are bright, vibrant, and saturated. It's definitely awesome to see that this has finally been figured out, and hopefully moving forward all SyncBox products will work like this. Now, another thing I want to highlight is how in the past, during white or more dull color scenes on the TV, backlight kits have had a very hard time accurately capturing those more muted colors. With fancy LED having the dedicated white, this is a huge area of improvement. The movie Dune showcases this very well because when there's not much color on the screen, the LEDs are still able to produce a tone that I feel does a great job of matching the content. And finally, I fired up the PlayStation 5 and I'm happy to report that it does what it says it can do in supporting 4K gaming at 120Hz along with all the other features such as variable refresh rate, auto low latency mode, and HDR. Here I'm running Spider-Man 2, and as you can see, VRR is turned on, we have 4K resolution at 120Hz, plus HDR is enabled. I know this is going to make a lot of people happy, as it was the #1 reason gamers have either opted not to pull the trigger on a sync box or had to go with a camera-based system. And as a side note, it will actually support up to 144 Hz if you're running your PC through the box and have a TV that supports this refresh rate like the LG G4. It's also my understanding for you PC gamers out there that this does play nice with G-Sync and FreeSync, which is something I haven't seen advertised, but interesting to know that it is supposed to work. So if you couldn't already tell by now, I'm super pumped about what Fancy LEDs just pulled off with this brand new offering, because it literally checks off every box that's important to me. And while I don't have time to set up their wall panels or LED strip that you can also incorporate to the setup, it's great to see them trying to create an ecosystem of products that all sync together, since that is one of my favorite things about Govee that they do so well. I'll leave you with a lot more footage of everything in action, but I did want to quick mention that I just started a Patreon account, and I want to thank all my supporters who contribute directly to the channel. Every little bit helps me get closer to my dream of doing this full time, so I want to thank you all for your support. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy the final pictures and videos. So this is our bedroom, which is approximately 250 square feet, and this is the only ceiling light in the entire space. Moving on to our living room, that's a little under 300 square feet, and again, only one overhead light in the corner right here. And going down to our basement, we have one fixture at the bottom of the stairs, but nothing going back up and nothing going down the hall towards the main area. And as you're looking at these three spaces, I want to share with you a number that I want you to remember, because it's going to be very important later on in the video, and that number is 11,960. So if you haven't guessed already, today's video is going to be all about the highly anticipated Nanoleaf Skylights. And the reason why this is such a big deal is because it's not just a new product, it's actually a completely new untapped market that Nanoleaf is going after, which I'll get into shortly. Getting things opened up, you have the instruction manual, mounting screws, wire nuts, drywall anchors, electrical wires, data connectors, and then for this specific kit, you have your three main lights. Now as I'm getting things taken out, the reason why this was on everyone's radar is not because it connects directly to your home's main power via standard light fixture wiring, but it's the fact you can connect up to 100 of these together from a single connection point, allowing for, in my case, overhead lighting to be scaled to any part of any room. So right here I have the main unit. It has a milky white diffuser cover and has a total of 8 rubber grommets around the perimeter that can be used to feed the power and data wires through depending on your layout. On the back side, you can see the metal plate that I'll be taking off here soon, which will be used to mount the unit to the ceiling. I'll first be removing the plastic ribbons wrapped around the outside. Then, if you look real close, you'll see these little indents where the housing meets the diffuser that you can use a flathead to twist in order to get the covers off. Once that's removed, I wanted to get a good look at the type of setup underneath. Zooming in, it looks like they're using 3 separate LEDs, one for your RGB colors, one for your dedicated warm whites, and a third for the dedicated cool whites. This pattern then repeats itself around the entire area. Now, I personally think some people, especially if they've never swapped out a light fixture before, might be a little intimidated by the setup process, so I'll walk you through the basics right here under optimal lighting conditions before doing it all over again on my ceiling. I'll start by unscrewing the 4 wing nuts around the middle. This is going to allow the metal mounting plate to be removed from the back that we can set aside for later. Next, I'm going to take off the middle plastic piece covering our electrical slots by removing the 4 screws holding that in place. Once that's done, you're going to see 5 separate places where you can connect your hot and neutral wires to. And you're also going to notice these little door-looking things, and depending on what connection point you use, these can be snapped off to allow the wire to pass through when everything gets put back together. Now, since this is our main unit, we will eventually be connecting this one to the wiring in our ceiling via the cable that comes with the kit. I'll be feeding the thicker end through the rubber grommet on the back and connecting them to whatever slot I want using the push connectors to secure them in place. Once they're in, give them a good tug to make sure nothing comes out. Then you can use whatever clips make the most sense to run the wires through to keep everything flat. And on the back, these are the ends that will eventually get connected to the live and neutral pre-existing wires in your ceiling. Moving on, I'm going to take one of the expansion units, and you'll notice that these come with some wires already sticking out one of the rubber grommets, and once you pop it open, the inside does look slightly different because it doesn't house the brains like the main unit does, nor does it have the metal mounting frame on the back. For this one, I'll again begin by removing the plastic covering over the connection terminal, and then from there I can feed the already connected wire from our second light through any of the openings on the side and connect it to any of the open terminals on the main unit. I do recommend making the connection first and then going back and tightening up the wires using any of the many clips that are attached to the surface. Now the last thing you need to do on this one is to take that little data line to bridge the lights together. I'll be using the slot on the top because it's open, but you certainly could squeeze it through the grommet at the bottom if that made more sense in your setup. So right now we have 2 units connected and I'll be moving on to the third, and with this one it's much of the same. And I would say by this point you probably have a pretty good feel for the connection process, and if you're doing a large install you could really start to move fast to get these put together. As far as design, you could really connect these in any way you'd like. I'm putting this one underneath the second, but I could just as easily connect it right back to our main unit if that's what I wanted. I'll get the black and white wires connected and then wrap this up by bridging the second and third light together with the data line. Now I will be installing a lot more than 3 of these panels on my ceiling, which I'll go over shortly, but before I do that I did want to test these out. I'm going to take a basic extension cord I had laying around and cut off the end. I'll separate the 2 wires, and with these, usually there's going to be one side that's ribbed, which is generally the neutral side, and then a smooth one, which is the live. I'll strip them both back and use some inline woggles to connect the live to live and the neutral to neutral. Once plugged in, I'll go ahead and fire up the Nanoleaf app. On the dashboard tab, hit the 3 dots near the top right and click Add Device. And I'm never a huge fan of QR codes, so I went to pair manually where it already had the skylights listed where I could select pair. From here, it'll have you enter in the 8-digit code found on either the instruction manual or inside the main unit. Once entered, click Next. After putting in your Wi-Fi information, it'll get things connected, and then you can assign it a room, give it a unique name, rotate the layout to how you have it, choose whether you want the settings to be backed up to the cloud, and decide if you want the lights after power is cut to turn on to full brightness or their previous state, and then you're all set. From here, click on the little water droplet to be taken to the options where you have all your colors, or if you hit the temp icon, you'll see your dedicated warm and cool white slider. And being that this product is meant to be used as a primary light source, having these dedicated whites are an absolute must. Next, I'll cycle through a few of the colors, and so far everything is very responsive and there have been no connectivity issues. I'm going to quickly put on the diffuser covers, and I would say it is a little bit more noticeable on camera than it is in person, but you can see that the middle does have a slight darker area. My suggestion for whenever they work on version 2 would be to try getting a few more LEDs added closer to the center so that the light would be perfectly uniform throughout. I'll go over more of the fun stuff you can do with the app later on in the video, but it's now time for me to set up a bunch of these on my ceiling, and the first place I'm going to start is my bedroom. After cutting power at the breaker, I'll first be removing the current light fixture until all that's left is the loose wires hanging down. Next, I'll take the metal mounting plate that the skylights came with and use the 2 screws in bag D plus H to secure the brackets to the ceiling can. Now instead of using the screw nuts, I'll be using the woggle clips to connect the live and neutral wires from our main module to the loose wires from our ceiling. Once connected, I'll push everything back up into the can before using the 4 wing nuts to get everything mounted. From here, it's just a matter of getting all the other skylights put up, and shout out to Handy Dad TV for this idea of using the black binder clips to help hold things in place while I put in the 4 screws on the corners. Now you may end up doing things differently, but since the main unit was attached to the metal bracket, I didn't feel the need to use screws for that one, and since these are actually pretty light, I didn't end up using any of the drywall anchors. This process actually went pretty fast once I got the hang of everything. I would first slide the wires through the rubber grommet, clip things in place, screw it into the ceiling, and then move on to the next. Once the design was complete, I went back and connected all the wires together just like I went over in the beginning part of the video, followed by attaching every unit together with the included data lines. Moving on, you can screw back in the L-shaped covers that go over the connection points, and then finally, the diffuser covers can snap in place. So as I'm putting things back together, keep in mind that I didn't have to call an electrician, no modifications were done to the home's wiring or breaker box, and everything is being run off that single connection point where the previous light fixture was installed. I'll save a lot more footage for the final results, but I did want to give you a quick before and after so you can see the dramatic difference that these made. Now above and beyond just trying to brighten up a dark room, I imagine the other reason people would end up buying these is for the RGB aspect. I'll be setting up the other kit downstairs in my game room to see how they look. I already have can lights down here, so I simply removed one of the bulbs to access the wires, removed the trim piece, connected the live to live and neutral to neutral, screwed the main unit into the ceiling without using the metal bracket, and put everything else up the same way as I did in the bedroom. As I'm getting everything installed, I did want to circle back to something I said at the beginning of the video, and that was the number 11,960. So my wife and I for a long time have wanted recessed lighting in more areas of our house, and we recently had an electrician come out to give us a bid for putting 4 cans in our bedroom, 6 in our living room, and 6 total going down to our basement. And you guessed it, the final price for that quote was $11,960 to get it done. And like many people out there who have older homes, our main breaker was no longer up to code, and if any work was going to be done, that would have to be updated, which was about $4,000 of the total estimate. And I say all of that because at least in my situation, I could buy about 60 of these individual skylights, spend a Saturday installing them myself, which would save me around $6,000 compared to going with the quote we were given. As a consumer, I love having options, and regardless of how you feel about this particular product, you have to tip your hat to Nanoleaf for being the first company to offer something like this. From here on out, I'll play some final footage of everything in action, but make sure to stick around after since I'll be going over a couple of my favorite features of the app, plus showing you how to get these connected to Alexa. Alright, so let's quickly go over how to set things up with Alexa. Open up the app and hit the plus icon and then select Add Device, Light, scroll down to Nanoleaf. These don't have matter, so go with No. Yes, my lights are powered on. Yes, they are already set up in the Nanoleaf app. Yes, I can control them using the Nanoleaf app. Go ahead and sign in, hit Allow, choose the device you want to connect, assign it to a room, and you're all set.
Alexa, turn on the skylights. Turn the skylights off. Turn on ocean. Turn on northern lights. Turn on shooting stars.
Let's transition over to the Nanoleaf app, and above and beyond the normal colors, definitely check out their pre-made scenes that you can cycle through, or create your own by hitting the plus button and either create a new palette or choose from a pre-existing one. From here you can paint each individual unit. This is super fun to do and something my kids also really enjoyed playing around with. You can then assign your scene motion or sound react animations, and if you're new to Nanoleaf, it will take some time to get accustomed to how everything operates, but after about 15 minutes it's all pretty intuitive. Next is their AI scene generator. Type in whatever you want and it'll come up with a scene and animation. This is a great way to quickly come up with some dynamic effects without having to go the DIY route. Another feature you're going to want to play around with is the sound react functionality. This is definitely a cool addition and something the kids and I had fun using.
Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Check, check, check. Hello.
And then finally, on the main screen, you can set up schedules for the lights to slowly turn on or off at certain times, and then Discover is where you can download scenes that others have come up with and upload it to the community for you to enjoy. Now to begin wrapping this up, as far as my bedroom, when I'm trying on clothes or cleaning, I usually have these set at full brightness. But at night, it's been great to be able to set them to warmer colors and dimming them down as my wife and I are getting ready for bed. In the downstairs game room, I love having them set to dynamic scenes to really add to the atmosphere. Oceans and Tron are a couple of my favorites that I seem to keep coming back to. But what I've also found out is that these do get bright enough where I can do some overhead unboxing shots without having to get my big studio lights out, which has been really nice. So overall, I'm really happy with how things turned out and how easy it was to completely transform both of these spaces. And like I mentioned before, this product isn't going to be for everyone, but if you're looking for an overhead main lighting solution like I was with all the extra RGB bells and whistles, Nanoleaf definitely hit a home run with the Skylights. So that about does it for this video. Again, thank you all for watching and I hope you have a blessed day.